In 1967, there was a single standing order whispered to every American Marine operating anywhere near Australian units, and it sounded irrational, almost superstitious. If you see an Australian soldier's rucksack lying on the ground, walk away. Do not touch it. Do not ask why. And whatever you value in your life, do not open it. The Americans called them jungle hobos. They looked homeless. They smelled like decay. They had not washed in weeks, sometimes months. Their uniforms were longer uniforms, but rotting layers of cloth sweat and mud fused together. They moved through the jungle like something that did not belong to the modern world. Men who could disappear into the tree line while being watched, men the Viet Cong feared. More than B-52 bombers, most Americans thought it was just myth, a story invented to scare new arrivals, until one curious helicopter crew chief made the mistake of assuming a backpack was just a backpack. He looked at that filthy canvas sack and laughed to himself. How dangerous could a bag really be? That decision ended his career in a single second. What was inside those packs was not food, not ammunition, not souvenirs. It was proof that the men fighting alongside American forces had stopped being soldiers a long time ago. They had become something else entirely, something the jungle accepted, something the enemy prayed never to meet. These were the whole Australian ghosts of the forest, and the truth behind them was far darker than any legend. The Huey touched down hard on red laterite soil, throwing diesel-soaked dust into the air. The smell of burning fuel mixed with rotting vegetation and stagnant water. It was 1967 when Captain James Whitfield of United States Army intelligence stepped onto Australian operational ground for the first time. That moment split his life into before and after he had read classified reports, kill ratios, top-secret assessments. But paper prepares you for nothing when reality hits your senses all at once. The heat was not just heat, it was weight, a living pressure that crushed breath and thought. But even that was not what shocked him first. It was the smell that crept into his nose like an animal fermented wet wrong triggering something ancient in his brain. It screamed danger. 5 figures emerged from the tree line at the edge of the base. Whitfield froze. They wore no visible insignia. Their uniforms were faded into unnatural colors. Their faces were masked in greasy camouflage. That made them look inhuman. One carried a rucksack, so filthy it looked excavated rather than worn. Every instinct trained into Whitfield told him to step forward and help. This was an Allied soldier, carrying weight in brutal heat, so he reached out. A steel grip clamped onto his arm. An Australian sergeant stopped him cold. Eyes empty, voice quiet. Not advice, a sentence, never touch our gear. The sergeant explained that inside those packs was not equipment. It was death wrapped in canvas. Whitfield did not yet understand why these men looked like corpses, why they smelled like something dug up rather than alive, why the Viet Cong command feared them more than airstrikes. But that smell was the first lesson. Inside those rucksacks was a philosophy of war alien to American doctrine. The United States relied on firepower, technology, speed, and noise. The Australians relied on biology, instinct, and patience. American soldiers looked at them with disgust, not realizing survival lived inside that filthy secret. Was not bravery. It was smell. To Americans, hygiene meant effectiveness. Soap, detergent, aftershave, clean rations, cigarettes, chocolate, beef, tobacco. Every American soldier carried an olfactory signature that screamed foreign presence. Their bodies released a chemical cloud unnatural to the Vietnamese ecosystem, and trained Viet Cong fighters could smell it long before they ever saw it. The jungle Americans smelled like civilization, and civilization was prey. The Australians understood something technology never could. The jungle does not forgive alien scents, so they erased theirs days before patrol SAS operators stopped washing completely. No soap, no toothpaste, no deodorant. Layers of bacteria, dirt, and sweat formed a biological shield, changed diet completely. No Western food, only rice-dried fish peppers. And then came the worst part, fish sauce nuke. They consumed it in massive quantities, until it saturated their bodies, until their sweat smelled identical to villagers and enemy. Fighters, they did not just eat it, they became it. Their gear followed the same rule: no chemical cleaning. Boots, rifles, slings soaked in sweat, mud, and fermented fish. Their equipment smelled like rot and leaf litter, indistinguishable from the forest floor. When Americans moved, the jungle went silent. Birds fled, animals screamed. The land itself warned of intrusion. When Australians moved, nothing reacted. The jungle accepted them. Were invisible. That smell, which made Whitfield gag, saved lives. Allowed men to walk within arm's reach of the enemy, unseen, unsmelled, unnoticed. Smell was only the surface. Inside those packs were secrets far deadlier, and touching one without permission could cost you a hand. The true danger hidden inside Australian rucksacks was revealed during what should have been a routine extraction. An American helicopter crew chief, known for being helpful, watched an exhausted Australian operator stumble toward the Huey. The man looked half dead, uniform soaked black, with sweat, movements, slow, pain obvious. The crew chief did what any decent soldier would do. He jumped down and grabbed the strap of the Australian pack. The help lift. I never saw the wire. Explosion was sharp, not loud, not cinematic, just cruel. Metal fragments tore through flesh, bone shattered instantly. The crew chief was thrown backward, screaming, as his hand ceased to function as a hand. Helicopter froze, rotors screaming. Men staring. The Australian operator did not apologize, did not panic, did not react. He calmly secured his gear, checked the rigging, and boarded the aircraft. To him, the mistake was not tragic. It was expected in Australian SAS logic. A rucksack was a weapon. If the enemy touched it, it had to kill. If an unfamiliar hand touched it, the risk was identical. From that moment, the warning became law. Do not touch their packs. Americans stopped helping, stopped approaching, stopped asking. Fear replaced confusion. Whitfield watched as the distance between allies grew. Not out of hatred, out of survival instinct, he soon learned that smell and traps were only the beginning. The Australians fought a war based on patience. They inserted by helicopter, then moved only meters, then stopped sometimes for days. They allowed the jungle to reset. Birds returned, insects resumed. Only then did they move. Movement was danger. Silence was information. They did not hunt. They waited, and to master this waiting, they relied on Aboriginal trackers, men whose skills predated civilization itself. Trackers who could read bent grass, disturbed soil, and broken leaves like written language. They taught the SAS that the jungle was not chaos. It was a manuscript. A snapped twig meant haste. A drying footprint meant recent passage. A bird alarm meant movement. While Americans searched for battalions, the Australians searched for absence. This allowed them to shadow enemy units for days. Watching, learning, waiting. The psychological effect on the Viet Cong was devastating. They were no longer hunters. They were prey. The jungle betrayed them. The trees watched them. Australians were everywhere, and nowhere their casualty ratio reached numbers so extreme. American analysts assumed error. 500 enemy dead for every Australian lost, not through firepower, through patience. But patience demanded a price. That price was paid in the swamps. During a classified mission, a 5-man team submerged themselves in stagnant water for 72 hours. Only hollow reeds for breath, no movement, no sound. Leeches attached by the hundreds, skin softened, then peeled away. Pain constant, relentless. No one moved. They entered a mental state beyond fear, beyond discomfort. They became driftwood. When the target boat passed, they erupted silently. Knives only 4 seconds. No screams when they emerged. Their bodies were ruined. Skin hanging, bleeding, eyes calm. They had weaponized suffering. The reputation spread. You are not safe on land. You are not safe in water. The final lesson Whitfield witnessed came when a 14-day patrol returned. They did not walk like men. They flowed eyes, unblinking skin, gray-green fungus growing. Leeches still attached. They smelled like death yet. They carried intelligence stolen from an enemy regimental headquarters. 5 men penetrated a facility guarded by hundreds. They waded through monsoon rain, crawled through drainage. Submerged beneath patrols inside the bunker, an Australian operator stood behind the enemy commander. Knife ready, but chose mercy. He let the man live to spread fear. The patrol extracted over 7 days, eating insects, roots, snakes, bodies running on reserves. Medicine claimed impossible. Found fractures, infections, dehydration, muscle loss. Psychologists found dissociation, mental compartmentalization. Survival at the cost of humanity. These men were optimized for hell. Civilian life could not recalibrate them. Marriages collapsed. Alcohol replaced silence. Violence replaced calm. Whitfield documented everything. His report was buried. Admitting the Australians succeeded meant admitting American doctrine failed. Warnings before the Tet Offensive were ignored. Thousands died in Phuoc too. The Australians were ready. Minimal losses. The lesson was rejected decades later. Those same techniques were adopted quietly, under different names. Too late for those who pioneered them. Whitfield, retired, taught history. Kept an Australian ace of spades on his desk. A message, not a trophy. Do not touch their packs. Because inside was not equipment. It was a philosophy, the willingness to become what war required. Regardless of the cost, the Americans had technology, the Australians had willin'. The jungle will was deadlier. The war required ghosts.